Good afternoon, everybody, and warm greetings to all the participants. Good afternoon and good morning. I want to welcome you to this working session of the Africa Regional Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction, where we'll be focusing on the theme of enhancing resilience at the local level. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to keep an eye on the chat box on the Q&A and utilize that to send any questions that you might have for the panelists and participants in this session. The way we're going to run this discussion is by having sort of a free question and answer interaction with our distinguished panelists. And I would like to introduce the panelists that I have with me right now with great pleasure. First of all, I have Mr. Kai Gatkoth, who's the Technical Director of Technical Director for Disaster Risk Reduction at the African Union Commission, a colleague and a friend. Also another colleague and friend, the Regional Director for UN Habitat Regional Office for Africa, Mr. Omar Saila. And I'm also very, very pleased to have with us Ms. Kobe Bryant, who is the Deputy Secretary General of ICLEI, as well as the Regional Director for Africa. And we will also have a pre-recorded intervention from Ms. Marilyn Mbogwa, who is the Regional Lead of Africa for the GNDRR. So I think when we talk about approaches for enhancing resilience, local resilience, these may range from very highly technical and resource-intensive resource-intensive approaches to simple and inexpensive practices. So some surveys have shown that while some local governments have progressed in raising awareness and developing resilience strategies, many are still lacking in implementation. And the big reason that we hear about that in terms of the challenges for implementation has to do with financial capacity, and which affects the implementation, of course, and also in-house technical capacity that might be lacking, and often the lack of or weak citizen engagement is that's not facilitated. And there are also other issues such as equipment and materials are also mentioned as critical factors that are needed to have successful implementations of disaster risk reduction actions at the local level. So as we go today, I think what we'll try to do is to try and maybe demystify the work that's done when it comes to disaster risk reduction at the local level. And we'll maybe dig into issues related to governance, data, and information management, and even issues related to the early warning and early action, how that could be applied at the local level. So hopefully we'll be able to share with you some best practices at the local level, what's happening. Some recommendations maybe will come out in terms of how to strengthen governance for resilient cities or for local actors. And also, hopefully we'll end up with have a strategic partnership for building comprehensive and local disaster resilience. So in order to kick us off, I'm going to begin my first question to my colleague Kai of the African Union Commission. And this question has to do with the issue of good governance at the local level. We understand that, Kai, that good governance creates a conducive environment for effective disaster risk reduction because it mobilizes political will, and potentially it can facilitate broad participation and partnership to ensure that political, social, and economic priorities are based on a broad consensus. So it's supposed to be support the all-inclusivity and of engagement in risk governance. So in your experience, what kind of opportunities do you think can be leveraged to further empower governance system, particularly at the local level, for local disaster resilience in Africa? So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Amjad, my brother and friend and colleague as well, and distinguished audience. from very reputable organizations and with extensive experience in the field. When it comes usually to the local resilience versus the urban resilience, what comes to mind most of the time, and to my view, in my view, is what summarizes these discourses is actually there is society theory that we all are aware of. And I would like to start really with the risk society quotation from Beck, who is the author of the risk society. And Beck's description of risk society is really a true reflection today. In his argument, he described risk society as a profound social transformation from industrial society to risk society, or simple to reflexive modernity. The risk society or industrial society at the moment, I think we are also part of that, are concerned of generating wealth. In the process of generating wealth, they are creating risk. Importantly, the concern of modernity that is generating wealth in action of risk is not only a true reflection of climate change discourses today, but also an important reality that characterizes discourses in urban resilience and building resilience at local level. Therefore, there is really need for a shift in ensuring balance between urban resilience and what I would call village resilience, or smart cities versus smart villages, to reverse the current trends in rural urban migration. The current rural urban migration is a true reflection of a rich society in 21st century. Now, building resilience at local level, of course, is essential because hazards, despite being transboundary and systemic, they usually occur at local level. And therefore, an effective local resilience must build on local governance and local solutions, including indigenous knowledge systems and participation of local people in decision-making. To achieve this, I believe 4 actions must be put in place. One, we need to recognize local solutions and practices to resilient building. We need to recognize that local solutions have evolved for millennia in response to shifting environmental and socioeconomic dynamics. There is a need to decolonize the growing hostility toward indigenous and local knowledge systems. And therefore, we must restore, record, preserve, and utilize the local resilient solution for decision-making. And secondly, we need to make sure that more financing and technical as well as technological resources have to go more to local levels to implement local DRR programs in order to ensure implementation of Sendai framework and Africa program of action at local level. As Beck would advise us of the danger of modernity, as he said before, I would argue that modernity is not bad. What is bad actually is modernity that is not risk-informed. And in building local resilience, we must be mindful of modernity that is people-driven, environment-friendly, and sustainable. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kai, for this very interesting intervention. I never thought one of the things that the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction talks about is the creation of new risk while you're doing development. And I never thought of it as, I like the way you put it. It's the generation of wealth itself can create new risk, and that has so many nuances and implications. And I also recognize the importance of safeguarding and promoting indigenous knowledge to help strengthening local communities' resilience. And we don't know much about that. And of course, the issue of financing is something that we need to come back to during this discussion, how to ensure that more financing goes to the local level. I'm very happy now to move to Regional Director of UN Habitat for Africa, Omar Saila, and ask you, Omar, about the diagnostic tools that support cross-sectoral, multi-sectoral approach, these diagnostic tools often provide a first step in helping cities to efficiently identify and tackle existing risks and unlock opportunities. So how can these diagnostics tools be used to leverage resilience and strengthen resilience at the local level?
Thank you very much, Amjad. I hope you can hear me very well.
Yes, we hear you.
First of all, I would like to thank UNDDR and others partners for really looking into these issues of resilience and articulate it to local level, because right now I think it's timely with this movement of decentralization and devolution we are seeing in Africa. And I think we are seeing very progressive policies in Kenya and other countries now giving much authorities to local government and local authority to deal with local economic development, and now with climate change and other related, hazard and disaster. But of course, we should acknowledge that resilience is inherently a multidimensional, multi-level, multi-cross-sectorial and stakeholders concept itself. So which means that resilience is everybody's business and does not just sit with one particular stakeholder of department of local level of governance. And on that, we need to look at beyond policies and financing. But you mentioned in your introduction the issue of capacity, ability for local government to manage those data and information. So we, UN Habitat, we have been looking into the concept of resilience when it comes to data, articulated with others, what we consider the building block for cities to be able, to establish a resilience strategy and policy and structure, which is about, looking into spatial dimension, capacity building, local economic development, and of course, governance. And all this should be based on real-time data, as you mentioned in your introduction. So the process of building resilience needs to be anchored in data and evidence, of course, to ensure that the challenges are accurately identified and the right solution designed. This information can be gleaned in a variety of ways through assessment, evaluation, surveys, GIS data, spatial data, meteorological and climate data and information, and so we can name. However, at the level of cities, this data need to be completely by information directly from the municipalities, communities, and key urban stakeholders. It is needed to round up the existing data and ensure that resilience building is people-centric and ground into real-time and solid data system. So as you may know it, UN Habitat has developed a number of diagnostic tools, as you mentioned in your question, Amjad, and participatory planning methodology that can help you to collect and analyze such data. So we have what we call the City Prosperity Index and a special development strategic framework, and tools that are specifically looking through a resilience lens are the City Resilience Profiling Tool and the City Resilience Action Planning Tool. So let me talk about the first one, which is the City Resilience Profiling Tool, which is a diagnostic and which is allowed to generate very detailed data and provide a cross-cutting analysis for resilient-based urban development. It uses a diagnostic methodology to determine shocks and stress facing a cities and establish priority action, allowing cities to capitalize on their existing data. The City Resilience Planning Tool and accompanying guidance assist local government to deliver on targets set out in a globally agreed intergovernmental framework. The tool has been designed to collect information and provide a resilient profile that is applicable to the wide range of city scale, geographies, and types, but it is especially useful for bigger cities. And by experience, it was implemented in 2 African cities like Dakar and Mobutu by UN Habitat, and UNDDR are gathered together and local authorities. So I mentioned as well the City Rapid Action Planning Tool, which was designed for small to intermediate cities in developing countries. The focus of the City Rapid Tool goes beyond the diagnostic, and it is used for facilitating participatory resilience planning. It enables community to identify and prioritize critical resilience issues and plan action and response through the development of a resilient framework for action. The methodology entails a series of activities that are implemented with the leadership of the municipality over 3 to 5 months. It is highly participatory, involving local communities, business, academia, and civil society. The city rep, as we call it, process show that community involvement and joint planning can generate valuable data through simple activity like participatory mapping and municipal self-assessment surveys. It has been implemented by UN Habitat in over 30 African cities in 12 countries and was recently taken out in the region and also implemented in the Middle East, which is creating a possibility of collaboration, South-South cooperation. It is an African product if you want, and that is now generating demand outside the region as we can see it now. As the question reflects, diagnostic is just the first step. The CityRap tool takes a comprehensive and holistic approach, focusing not only on the data collection, analysis, and diagnostic, but using that to facilitate a participatory planning and prioritization process, which is part of the urban governance we are talking about at the beginning and from the EU declaration as well. Participatory planning, in turn, create an enabling environment to perform climate action and build resilience by ensuring political will and community awareness and buy-in. Of course, this is also critical for financing. As we know from experience, current level of financing in Africa are insufficient to meet the need to mitigate and adapt to climate change and build resilience. So resources needed are enormous, and cities need multiple financing mechanisms in place. The tool I also just mentioned, the CRPT or the CityRap, help generate the data, evidence, political will, and local ownership that can not only convince donors and investors to commit funds, but also ensure that resilience intervention are correctly targeted, sustainable, and long-term. They also build the capacity of municipalities to access funds. For example, at the end of the CityRap exercises, not only does the city have a resilient framework for action, but also a bankable project concept note to use for mobilizing resources to implement resilience and climate action can be put on the table. There are, of course, some limitations to such diagnostic tool, and we need to talk about it. For example, the process can get too complex and data heavy, and it's sometimes difficult to maintain the momentum and keep busy municipal technicians engaged. It can also become more work of them. And I think, Amajai, you mentioned the issue of capacity and in the beginning of your introduction. It's important that the data and knowledge generated is shared and well managed. And for that, we need to work with a number of partners, including universities and other institutions, academic, to strengthen capacity to create the building block for this data system to be sustained. So for my conclusion, I think the takeaway from this question is that comprehensive and cross-cutting diagnostic is indeed a critical first step for resilient building at the local level, as it is permit a clear understanding of the challenge and lays the foundation for sustainable solution. However, it's only the first step, and we should acknowledge it, and must be supported by committed leadership, strong governance, inclusive and participatory planning, innovation, and adequate financing to ensure that the diagnosis lead to action. This is a question, my response to your first question. I mean, I think I have been very long, but back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Omar. And one of the things that throughout the conference that I've attended and many of the sessions, the issue of data has come up everywhere. I cannot think of one session that I have seen in the regional platform that has not discussed, brought up the issue of data. And there seems to be a misunderstanding or at least a lack of agreement on what data each constituency is looking for and what they need. And this is something that needs to be discussed, I think, further down the road. I also look forward to maybe one day we'll be able to get a demonstration of the city's resilient profiling tool. I'll be interested to see that, but we'll keep that for another day. I'll come back to you later with some questions that I have. So before I go to my next speaker, Ms. Kobe Bryant, who will be followed by a video from Marilyn Bogo, I just wanted to encourage everybody to begin to think of some questions and comments or observations that you would like to share with the participants. So do put those questions up in the chat box for us to consider. So, Ms. Kobe Bryant, it's nice to have you with us. And now, our baby, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, provides strong guidance to support national and local efforts to build resilience to disasters, of course, within the context of sustainable development. So how can we leverage multi-level governance for local level resilience? Maybe you can first begin by unpacking what we mean by multi-level governance and how it can contribute to local resilience.
Thank you very much. It's my real pleasure to be here with you today, and to distinguish and eminent guests, partner organizations, colleagues and friends. It's wonderful for ICLEI to be here with all of you. I would like to give a special word of thanks to our host, the government of Kenya, as well as the organizers of today's session, our UNDRR friends, the African Union Commission, and the Intergovernmental Authority on Development. Climate resilience must be a major priority for African cities who face unprecedented climate change impacts on a daily basis already, which is overlaid by significant socio-economic challenges which have been significantly enhanced with the advent of COVID-19. I would like to focus, of course, today on how we can leverage multi-level governance for local level resilience. It is widely recognized that most of the urban growth, will take place in cities in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, where the expansion rate of informal settlements is high and capacities for urban management are limited. We know the figures that Africa is projected to see the urban population rise from approximately 33 million in 1950 to 744 million in 2030, and over 1.2 billion by 2050. Staggering. Indeed, the UNDRR Global Assessment Report classified nearly all nations situated in sub-Saharan Africa among the most vulnerable to climate disasters. To pardon the pun, Africa is most definitely in the eye of the storm when it comes to both climate change and disaster risk reduction. The Sendai framework through Target E aims to substantially increase the number of countries with national and local disaster risk reduction strategies by 2030. This target cannot be achieved without a concerted effort to foster and mainstream multi-level governance on the continent. ICLEI is therefore proud to support the UNDRR and its initiatives, such as Making Cities Resilient 2030, the first campaign for which was launched at ICLEI's Resilient Cities Congress many years ago, and more recently, the MCR 2030 launch at our Daring Cities 2020 virtual Congress in October. The work of the MCR 2030 campaign and its core partners, including ICLEI and other city networks, is integral in building a global collaborative platform for disaster risk reduction, and we are pleased that the initiative is reaching a new phase, building on more than a decade of advocacy towards implementation. In Africa, as in many other regions to date, our responses to disasters have largely been reactive. Given the significant impact of natural hazards and climate change will have on urban areas, it is urgent that increasing priority is now placed on proactive, adaptive planning to reduce and manage potential disasters and climate change before they happen. Ensuring climate considerations are embedded in all city planning policies, not just in standalone climate plans, is crucial to ensuring resilient and sustainable development. And climate change is a multi-sectoral issue. It affects all of us in multiple ways, and thus integrated and systemic approaches are needed to tackle it. Multi-level governance harnesses the cross-scale and cross-discipline relationships necessary for inclusive governance and decision-making on all levels of government that builds local-level climate resilience. A whole-of-government approach is needed, whereby ministries, public administrations, and public agencies align their efforts with local governments and all levels of subnational government in order to achieve maximum effectiveness. Collaborative governance can improve municipal planning and, in turn, increase the resilience of cities to the impacts of climate change and numerous social and developmental challenges. At ICLEI, this is an approach that is mainstreamed across all of our work, and we would encourage those interested in multi-level governance to have a look at our recent publication, which provides a guide to implementing multi-level governance action, and we'll add the link in the chat box. We at ICLEI know that multi-level governance is one of the most indispensable tools we have in fostering subnational and national resilience. Strengthened multi-level governance collaboration should be a first step in order to support countries in achieving international commitments and climate resilient development at a local level. So when we talk about multi-level governance, we're really talking about the top level of government from global to local, all working hand in hand, aligning policies, aligning processes, and importantly, creating an enabling environment for local governments to act, to implement, because it's at the local level where the action needs to take place. I would just like to briefly mention a few key points here. For example, we need to continue to build partnerships and collaborate, combining resources and efforts to be able to tackle challenges at scale. We also need to improve information sharing and access to data, as we've heard. We need better, transparent, and accessible mechanisms to store and share information and data. We need to increase capacity on financial mechanisms and development of robust project proposals, bankable proposals, to support implementation at scale. And we need to understand that institutional arrangements differ. Here we need to dedicate time and resources to improving the frameworks at national and subnational level to support policy development and implementation. We contribute to enabling progress within our global network of more than 2,500 local and regional governments. Our Fortitude Initiative, for example, was launched following the devastating and far-reaching impacts of Cyclone Idai and Kenneth, that were felt in many cities across Southern Africa in early 2019. ICLEI has always prioritized low carbon, resilient, and people-centered development. And therefore, we have also thrown our full weight behind both the Race to Zero and Race to Resilience initiatives. These global campaigns rally leadership and support from business, cities, regions, and investors in pursuit of a healthy, resilient, low-carbon recovery that prevents future threats, creates decent jobs, and unlocks inclusive, sustainable growth. Cities and their citizens in particular are powerful drivers of change because they can drive solutions to the challenges they face that are more progressive, more targeted, more tailor-made to their local environment, and faster acting than those delivered at national and international levels. We know through action on the ground, cities can show that they are engines of change and beacons of hope. We do not have to wait forever to make change. We can act rapidly and act now at the local level. This opportunity positions cities at the forefront of change and transformation. No national government can implement meaningful climate action without its cities, and no city can effectively tackle climate change without a proper national framework and targets in place. Therefore, there is a need to put in place collaborative approaches to enable and empower actions at all levels of government. Now is our time to rethink, redesign, and reboot together. I look forward to the outcomes of this session, especially the recommendations on accelerating local action for resilience, as well as increased national and local government and partner sign-ups to MCR 2030. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kobe, very much for your intervention. I think I saw some similarities in terms of, or coherence at least, between what I heard from Omar from UN Habitat, particularly on the issue of bankable projects and the need to find ways to do that. And it seems that UN Habitat may have, through its city wrap, some sort of recommendation or at least an initiative that maybe we should look into deeper to see how we can help in moving this forward. And thank you also for mentioning the MCR 2030, the Make a Setting Resilience Campaign 2030, which also focuses or has among its key approaches is to have a bankable project, support local government, local communities and local cities to have bankable projects that they can leverage to support city resilience. I'll come back to you with a little bit more, some questions if I don't get as many as I want from the audience. Before I go to the next video, actually a video intervention from Marilyn Bogwa of GNDR. Just want to encourage again the speakers to the participants, to bring in their questions in the chat box. So we're going to now begin show the video from Marilyn Bogwa and from GNDR, and she will be enlightening us about the issue of how communities can be at the heart of the resilience agenda. And the question that she'll be answering is that what are some of the best practices to ensure community engagement for resilience? So now we hopefully will be able to get into the more practical examples that we might be able to use as models that we can adapt and lessons that we could learn. So let's then show the intervention from Marilyn Bogwa through her pre-recorded video, please.
Good evening. My name is Marilyn Bogwa. I'm with the Global Network of Civil Society Organizations for Disaster Reduction, based in Nairobi, Kenya. I'm the regional lead for Africa. Today I'll be speaking on enhancing resilience at the local level. So what I'd like to start with a quick definition, which is from the Stockholm Resilience Center on the meaning of resilience. So as we know that resilience is capacity of a system to be it an individual, a forest, a city, or an economy to deal with change and continue to develop. So it's all about how humans and nature use shocks and disturbance like a financial crisis or a climate change to spur renewal and innovative thinking. So for GNDR, our approach has been that we look at the evidence and the interaction with our members and see how they emphasize the importance of ensuring communities are at the heart and parcel of resilience building. In this regard, we have ensured that as we're looking at this approach, we always advocate to start at the local level. So we recognize the local context and understand community perspective of risk. The other approach that we use is we partner and collaborate, and here we strive to work across all groups and levels to pursue the interests of people most at risk. Include all groups, that is ensuring that there's inclusion of all groups, particularly those most at risk, promoting gender equality. And here we're looking at how can we implement gender transformative approaches. The other three approaches that GNDR uses is that we seek to mobilize different resources. So here we're looking to share resources, building on existing capacities, knowledge, and other sources of resilience. So we're not only looking at money, we're looking at maybe like the capacity, the skills that the communities and the other stakeholders might have. Then we seek to align policies with practices. So how can we ensure that there's coherence across the disaster risk reduction, climate change, and other development frameworks and activities? And then also, lastly, how can we be accountable to the local communities most at risk, ensuring that we are accountable and challenge others to do the same. I want to focus a bit on our flagship project, which is Views from the Frontline. So VFL 2019, as you might have heard, is a fast-forwarding monitoring process that supports inclusive people-centered approaches to DRR. VFL aims to strengthen inclusion, collaboration between governments and local municipalities, at-risk people and civil societies in risk reduction, resilience building policies and practices. The primary objective of VFL has been to establish a citizen-based process to measure local progress in inclusive risk governance, to strengthen in-country civil society monitoring, DRR, and advocacy capacities, to support the establishment of local level baseline and generate local risk information to inform policy and local actions. VFL is currently being implemented in 50 countries. So based on that, we've been able to draw conclusions based on the analysis and the data that was collected from there. So we were able to identify some cross-cutting and key learnings. And among them is that for there to be effective change, at-risk communities often have little choice but to assume primary responsibility for tackling multiple shocks and stresses. And these approaches need to be people-focused, simple and practical, building on the innate strengths and capacities of individuals, their communities, and local institutions. Community resilience is a building block and foundation for natural resilience. So based on the 9 global conclusions, we were able to come up with 5 key core recommendations. And here what we're saying is that we recognize the impact of everyday disasters on lives, livelihoods, and assets. There's need to prioritize the most at risk, poorest, and marginalized people. Tackle the underlying causes of people's vulnerabilities to disasters. Mobilize political commitment by focusing on the rights, responsibilities, and accountabilities, and promote partnerships and public participation. So the second part of my presentation is I want to focus on what are some of the best practices that we can ensure for community engagement for resilience. And here, what we are advocating for as GNDR is that development must be risk-informed. And here, what we are saying is that policy decisions must take disaster risk into account. Development choices create risk as well as opportunity. Analyzing risk means assessing the complex threats that people face, their vulnerabilities, and their capacities. Decision makers must listen to the communities most at risk. As we're all aware, risk is perceived differently by different people, different communities in different regions and localities. When development is not risk-informed, communities report that far from offering progress, the so-called development is actually creating risk, increasing existing risk and wiping out any potential gain. There's need to understand and assess the complex threats and risks, challenges and opportunities, and there's also need to take disaster risk into account. Finally, sustainable development requires local level leadership. So we really emphasize that local communities must be enabled to participate, influence, and make decisions on risk-informed development policies and practices. Communities, as we are well aware, have critical knowledge of the threats they face and the consequences, the actions which help to reduce risk and barriers to these actions. In conclusion, civil societies have an important role to play in supporting the process. And we also see that national governments have the primary responsibility for the resilience of their citizens. And with this, we find that civil society organizations are often best placed to facilitate the dialogue between governments and communities, and thus they're able to support local authorities in the implementations at the local level. Thank you.
Okay, I think we've received a good input from Marilyn of GNDR. I don't know if she'll be around to take questions, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. Again, the issue of inclusiveness and all of society approaches has been raised. The issue of data has come up again, and I think one of the important points is the issue when she was talking about best practices and the importance of risk-informed development. She mentioned the need to assess the risk at the local level and the complex risk, I think she referred to, and this links to the whole disaster risk reduction theme that we keep talking about, which is how to address systemic risk. And I saw a presentation earlier that's talking about almost a surgical assessment of risk has to be done in order to understand how one disaster can lead to others, such as COVID-19, and have these cascading interconnected effects. So I thought that was important. Now, let me at this stage maybe pull up a question for the audience that from the audience that I have seen in the chat. And it's talking about, the question reads, we have heard about governance and tools. So do the panelists have any insights on how we can better support financing to enhance resilience at the local level? And this is something I think that I was interested in actually in bringing up, how to enhance financing at the local level. And I was wondering, is this like a national government responsibility, or is this a local government responsibility, or is this something else? So I'm going to start maybe with Kobe, then go to Omar, because you both spoke about the issue of projects and financing, and I wanted to see maybe you can dig a little bit deeper into your presence. So may I start with you, Kobe?
Yeah, I think it's everybody's responsibility, and everybody in cities' responsibility as well. But let me talk a little bit from a local government perspective today. We often say money doesn't flow to local governments, and there's a lot of truth in the fact that finance mechanisms are not geared or easily accessible for local governments. But let's and we often hear that argument, and it's true. But let's turn it around a little bit and think about from a city perspective. I advocate that cities need to start thinking more about themselves as businesses. They need to think more about where their future funding is going to come from and what they want to be, what sort of city they want to be 10, 20, 30 years down the line, and have an active, workable plan towards that. And it's true that not enough money can come just from the pockets of taxpayers and from fiscal moves from national to local. So they need to reach out, they need to form partnerships, they need to understand what a bankable project means, what will attract an investor to invest or loan funds to that city. So a lot of work can be done by cities themselves in order to improve their ability to draft, conceptualize, and then see through bankable projects that they can put forward towards the investment world, both the private sector and the public sector, development banks, etc. And then if you look inside a city as well, the way they do their budgets, I think there's a lot of scope there to rethink budgets, to really do zero-based budgets from a zero-based perspective, where you rethink and reprioritize what they should be spending their funds on and how they make their choices for funding. There's a lot of money sitting in some of our bigger cities, but it does not necessarily get utilized at the most optimal level. I'll stop there for now, but it's definitely a point that needs more unpacking.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Omar. Omar, I'm going to give you the same question, but I'm thinking a little bit about the links and the how do you call it, the relationship between the national and local authorities. And I'm wondering what is the best practice on that. I mean, here in Kenya, for example, there's a whole ministry just dealing with devolution affairs, and a lot of times during the discussion within the Sendai framework, there's a lot of talk about empowering local communities. What does that mean? Is it financial? Is it political? Is it having autonomy? And so I was wondering, from your experience that you and Habitat, what is the best way to strengthen that national, local level cooperation, politically and as well as socioeconomically, if possible?
Thank you, Amjad. I think this is a problematic which is in the heart of the discussion currently in Africa when it comes to the relation between national and local government. Something we should acknowledge first is the financial weakness of the local level. Because in many countries, local authorities and cities and municipalities depend on transfer from national government. And this transfer are quite, if you want to, precarious. And that's what we experienced during the COVID-19, where the crisis, that cities, they do not have any means to respond to the crisis in terms of facilities, in terms of capacity and others, because the transfer system is not enough to cover all those needs for the local system. I think first point. The second point, the question I'm asking for sustainability as well, is really how to unlock the potential of finance at the local level. I think Kobe has touched a bit on that. And we need to look at intentionally and technically how this should happen, because right now we realize that in Africa, in many cities and local government systems, they have a lot of potential. But what is missing to unlock, this potential to be part of the budget and to inform basic services and others is about, institutional framework, capacity, and policy element. We need to look at this dimension. I think we see this very important example from South Africa when you talk about best practices, where we have this system of transfer to local government, and even local government is not able even to spend it because they don't have capacity. And behind that as well is the issue of bankable project. I think we need to come back to the issue of bankable project as well. And from my conversation with local government, the whole question is really how you can bring this expertise here to identify, gather the data, and help us to develop, sound projects that can be put on the table of the national government or for the, private sector. I think that's where, as United Nations, we need to look at how we can build this capacity. But of course, this is shared responsibility between national and local government. But at the same time, at the policy level, is this articulation between, local priority and national priority. If you have a local government which is isolatedly working itself, it will be difficult, to get the support from national government. I think this NDC now on the climate change aspect, for example, is an opportunity, to get articulation between local and national government. But also we have all this VLR and VNR going on now, local review system, voluntary national review system that need to be articulated to make sure at least the priority of the local level are well captured at the national level. And when the Ministry of Finance has to make decisions, has to put strong meat on that. But also my last point is really looking into innovating financing system, because we all know that, the financing element in many parts in Africa, except few of them are weak and are relying on loan and credit. So right now, I think the innovative financing is looking into, private sector partnership, public-private sector partnership, but also looking at the concept of investment. I think now people are getting out of grant now. It's more about financing and business making. How we can create opportunity for financing for private sector on this green climate element and on this green element, whether it is energy system, water, sanitation, with bankable project, we also with due diligence systems that can help, the municipality to get more taxation system, but also to create jobs. It's very important as well. How this sector can lead to job creation for youth as well in the particular sector, because at the end of the day, they will go to the big cities and create what we call these informalities that Kobe has spoke about during the presentation. I think those are some elements that we now look at. We need to look at various levels, national level, local level, and internationally speaking, what type of partnership should we build to allow municipalities and local government to tap on external resources? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Omar. I appreciate that quite comprehensive response. I'm not going to let Kai off the hook because I'm not going to ask him the same question. I'm going to switch a little bit. Kai, you mentioned something about decolonizing hostility of indigenous knowledge. It's a very strong statement, and I wanted to maybe build on that and listen and hear from you a little bit more about your views on how indigenous knowledge can add value to resilience or disaster resilience of local communities. I don't know if you have any particular examples or maybe some thoughts about how we can maybe dig deeper into the added value of indigenous knowledge and local resilience. Over to you, sir.
Oh, thank you very much. What I think there are several examples really. Let me just take one example from Mediterranean. In Tunisia, we have what we call al-majl. Al-majl is a water harvesting methodology that is locally used by local people and is currently one of the relevant tools for adaptation. But yet, when you are designing local strategy, you don't take that into account. Government tend to deploy Western science methodologies that are what I would call quantitative, and that really do not reflect the local reality. And what I mean the hostility is that we don't recognize that these local solutions are relevant to the current situation. Because of, I mean, what many will call a decolonized mind, I mean, a colonized mind. All of us, you know, we went to school and we bring methodologies that are outside to our societies. Very important, yes, but we need to make sure that this also take into account local realities. There are very simple tools that need to be included in a policy decision. By so doing, you actually increase local participation. Because when you deploy tools and scientific sophisticated methodologies that people don't understand, and then you're actually complicating risk communication. So I think the local resilience policy dialogue must start with empowering local solutions. And I think that is the view I believe would actually empower participation at local level.
Thank you very much, Kai, for that very interesting example, in particular on the Tunisian aspects, and giving us something to go on. I think just listening to you, I think the importance of, I think we need to do a little bit more in terms of documenting these indigenous success stories and indigenous practices here, and utilizing them a little bit more, and facilitating or enabling them to be used more in terms of local resilience. I appreciate your response. Kobe, there's a specific question for you. It says, resilience is a cross-cutting issue. Can you share some example of how ICLEI addresses this? It's a nice broad question. I think you were talking earlier about climate resilience and disaster resilience, and but it'd be good to hear a little bit more from you on that. Go ahead.
Sure. It is a very broad question, but maybe and resilience, I think, you know, if you talk about resilience from an environmental perspective or sustainable development perspective, of course, it already defines it a little bit. But within that definition, there's also a lot of linkages to be made. So on the one hand, one's talking about finding systemic solutions and understanding that at the local level, cities function as systems, and all things are connected in terms of, if you look at water flow, resource flow, consumption, production patterns, lifestyle choices, all those things link together to make a community more resilient. But maybe what I'll do is I'll quickly just focus on the link to nature. So we cannot really talk about disaster risk management, addressing disaster management, talking about addressing climate change without talking about nature. So the UN Secretary General said making peace, for humanity to make peace with nature is the defining challenge that we have for this century. And we know already that we are not living inside planetary boundaries, and that most of what we consume and most of what we produce, we get from nature. And most of that consumption and production takes place at city level, 75+% of that. So restoring humanity's relationship with nature, I think, is absolutely key. And one example that we have, it's a partnership initiative, is called Cities with Nature. And Cities with Nature brings together the WWF, ICLEI, many organizations, IUCN, the Nature Conservancy, many more, that take hands, providing a free and open platform for cities to make their commitments and demonstrate their progress towards those commitments on the Cities with Nature platform. Already there are about 200 cities from around the world, large and small, that are linking to that platform, where they can see each other's plans and progress around nature, making the link to climate change, making the link to resilience. And I would recommend also that we look at linkages, if we go forward in MCR 2030 towards initiatives like that, which focuses on nature. So nature is very much key. If I say that resilience needs to be mainstreamed, nature is very much key and part of that whole equation.
Thank you, Kobe, very much. Yes, we do talk about nature-based solutions in many ways, and this is something that UNDLR is trying to strengthen its involvement and its support to. in the future, and so much appreciated. I only have 5 minutes, so what I'm going to do is maybe just request you sort of give you the freedom to maybe take a minute and a half each, just to maybe give some final words. And I'll start with the final words, including what specific issues you want us, messages you want us to walk away with from this event. So I'm going to start the same way I began, the same order with Kai. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I think two things here. Maybe with financing, the African Union established the African risk capacity with a parametric insurance mechanism. And ACT at the moment is providing multi-million payouts to countries that benefit communities directly. I think this is a mechanism where local government would need to push their government to benefit from, because the idea of ACT is to ensure that we have financing at local level. Secondly, on the governance aspect, I think it's important that we have, the capacity development aspect is very important, and we really need to ensure that there is technology, not just transfer, but development of technology at local level. Of course, building on nature-based solution and local capacities, and not just transfer of technology. But I think this is an area where we need to build partnerships, which is multi-level governance, as Kobe would describe. But I think through that multi-level governance, there is an opportunity to build capacity and build local-based technologies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kai. Good messages. I'll take it, particularly the one on ARC and the African risk capacity and its link with communities. Omar, can I come to you, sir?
Thank you, Amjad. Again, congratulations for this very thoughtful session. You facilitated. And my first point is where I think Kai has finished, his intervention, the issue of capacity. Whatever we talk about, financing, policy, and everything lie about capacity. And we talk about bankable project. We talk about ability of collecting data. This comes to capacity. Most of the time, we forget in our intervention, in our proposal. I think for Africa, for where we are now, if you want to local government to play this, key role in the front of disaster and reduction, we need to look at the aspect of capacity. And that's the reason why UN Habitat is carrying out a project financing by Green Climate Adaptation Funds in Southern Africa to build resilience for local authorities using different tools, but also make sure we have awareness and engagement, inclusive process with local government. And we see positive outcome where now I think these cities and municipalities can share their experience on data collection, on strategizing, and all respond early warning to the whole world, including Mozambique, Malawi, Madagascar, and others. My second point, which is really looking into the trend of Africa urbanization now, I think Kobe has talked about the expansion of cities in Africa, but also at the same time, the increased informality we are seeing. Because right now, the figure is worrying. In African cities, we have 54% of population living in informal settlement, which is prone to hazardous situation and all whatever deprivation you can talk about. That's the reason why when we talk about resilience, it's good to look at the spatial dimension to make sure our cities are well planned and equipped, and make sure municipalities can anticipate to this urban growth in a way that they establish the infrastructure, but also avoiding hazard and disaster where they establish people, because in many countries, informal settlement has been established in landslide area or poor prone area to flood and others. That's why we, as UN Habitat, we insist really on this planning component as a backbone for this resilience reconstruction. My last point is the one that has been raised by colleague, Kay, partnership. And that's the reason why I'm always pleased to come to this table, Amjad, because we have the spirit of working together and also linking our tools and thought to make sure at least we are behind this local government system in terms of technical assistance and advisory. And let's work it together again and continue to this process, this journey, knowing that there's a lot that need to be done and a lot to come as well in Africa. And only when we get together that we can do it. Thank you very much again. Back to you.
Thank you, Omar, very much. Very good on the partnership issue, and we do work together, all three of us, and on this call, all four of us. Kobe, you have 1 minute. I think I lost the time. Sorry.
And I think Kai and Omar said it all, and let me not repeat, but completely second everything that Kai and Omar said about finance, partnerships, working together. The issue about planning, land use management, all those things are absolutely key. We've got to understand, unpack informality a lot deeper, because that's part of the makeup and who we are in Africa, and it's going to be part of our future as well. So how do we reach those communities in informal settlements? What early warning systems do we put in place that are executable when needed? How do we prevent things from spilling out of control when a disaster is about to occur? If we do not know who lives where in our city and how to reach them. So I think, we need to really understand the uniqueness of our continent and the challenges that comes with rapid urbanization, rapid growth, and, put our early warning systems in a very robust way forward that will speak to those people who need it most, the most vulnerable within our communities. So I'll end up just by saying, I think the most important word here is partnership. And we are with you. And thank you very much to each one of you. It's wonderful to be working so collaboratively across Africa. And we're looking forward to working with you on MCR 2030 and many other things together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kobe, and that's the best ending, and I could not certainly compete with. So I will not. I think I cheated a bit and got you to give me the messages, the conclusion for this session, and I really appreciate your time, Kai, Omar, Kobe, and of course Marilyn Gogwa of GNDR. It's a pleasure and a privilege to speak to you, and I do look forward to actually coming back together between our organizations and making sure that we take these recommendations, these ideas that you have brought to our attention forward in support of African local communities. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lovely to be
Thank you,
here.
Amjad.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.